Hello and welcome to a special episode of The Australian Runner, a show about running and everything running related. I'm Ben, and with me is Chris.
Hello everyone.
This special episode is a recap of the final night of the Nitro Athletics series, as well as our thoughts on the series as a whole. Let's get into it. Let's start off the show with a recap of the final night, night number 3 of racing. Like we've done with nights 1 and 2, so you can check out those episodes as well.
Yeah.
So we'll start off with our favourite event of the last night.
For me, it was the 2x300 metre relay. It became up the Australians versus the Bolt All-Stars in the last leg. Luke Stevens versus Kieran Clement. 400 metre hurdle gold medalist in Rio just a few months ago. And it was very close, very tight at the line, and the Aussies just got up, and it was just such a good race to watch because it was just such a tight tussle, and it was definitely my favourite event of the night. But you've got something else. What was yours?
So my event, like I'm assuming a lot of other people's, was the men's 150.
Of course.
It was really good to see Bolt get out there in an individual race and absolutely smash the competition.
Yeah.
He ended up winning fairly comfortably. He basically jogged the last 30 metres. He had to make sure that the New Zealander on the outside didn't quite catch up to him. So Bolt, he's a legend of athletics, so it's really good to see him get out there winning a race.
Yeah.
And he said that's probably the earliest he's ever run a big event in the season.
Yep. Yeah, it was good to see him out there running by himself. He said other years he'd been injured in Feb, so could be a strong last year for him in the lead to London.
Yeah, before he retires.
Mm-hmm.
So next we'll talk about our favourite performance of the night. So you can start off as well.
Yeah, I think the Bolt All-Stars in their 4x1 relay, they won by, I think it was 2 seconds overall. They really killed it. They started off with Asafa Powell and Usain Bolt, and they got them that far ahead, and then the two ladies after them kept them well ahead of the chasing pack, and they just absolutely annihilated the rest of the field. It was such an incredible performance. It ended the night, ended the series, and it was just a great event to finish with.
Although Jack Hale did well, he clawed his way back 1 spot in the field, I think.
Yeah.
And if the race was 5 metres longer, he probably would have clawed back another 2.
Yeah.
He caught up so much ground just in the last leg.
He did, definitely did. And you had a different performance? What was that?
It was one of the biggest performances of the night, especially from an Australian perspective. It was Riley Day winning the women's 150.
Yeah.
So for a 16-year-old to come against ex-Olympians and win, it's pretty amazing, especially given how young she is as well. Although it shouldn't be too surprising, considering how well she performed in the old schools. She broke the records for the 100, 200 metres.
Yeah, she's already nearly a star of the sport, and this series has put her on the map in Australian athletics. We've hardly had many good Australian sprinters recently, but she looks like just about the next best thing, with Ella Nelson, who went to Rio but didn't compete in this series.
So yeah, we've got Riley Day and Jack Hale for the men's, because he's only 18 and she's 16, so definitely plenty of talent rising up the ranks.
Yeah, always good. We'll move on to something interesting that happened during the night. I have to say that Usain Bolt loaded up his team with quality. He was gunning for the win last night. Jenna Prandini from the US was put in 3 events: the 60 metre, the 2x300 relay, and the 4x1 relay to end the night with. So Usain Bolt went to his big gun, Jenna, and she did very well, and she killed it last night.
Yeah, we saw angry Usain the other night, so he's come out and we saw the real competitive side of him, determined to win last night.
Yeah.
My favourite interesting moment was at the start when Seb Coe and Isis Holt landed in the helicopter bringing the trophy. I thought that added some rockstar appeal to the night as a whole.
Yeah, and it was good to see that a para-athlete got the honour to do it with Seb Coe. She went to the Rio Paralympics last year. Great up-and-coming young para-sprinter, and it was good to see that she got some limelight for her achievements.
Okay, so that's it for the first part of the show. That was just a wrap up our thoughts of the final night. So now we'll move on to what we thought of the series as a whole.
Yeah.
So what are your preliminary thoughts now that it's finished?
We'll just try to give a bit of an overall summary of what happened. And the way I was seeing it was that it was always set up to be this new athletics concept that rivaled the Big Bash, which has transformed the Australian domestic cricketing scene over the past 6 years. But the problem with the comparison is that there was always a big cricket following here at the international level, just not at the state level.
Yeah.
So they got a lot of people to then filter down. So I could see athletics bringing interest up to the level of cycling in Australia. Cycling have like the Tour Down Under and the Cadell Evans Great Ocean Road Race that people head along to and everyone knows that are on. So I think the interest in the Australian community might reach those levels. I mean, it's great to see it back in the media.
Yeah, because athletics really has that spike every probably 2 years, Commonwealth Games and Olympics, and people sort of tend to forget about it for the rest of the year, really.
Yeah.
Whereas other sports like cricket, there's always a cricket game going on somewhere.
Yeah.
Obviously, footy's just in the paper 24/7.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're right with saying that if it got up to the level of cycling where people hear about the Tour de France in the middle of the year, got the Great Ocean Road Race, we get some big names coming to Australia like Chris Froome, who won the Tour for the last 2 or 3 years. He's been in Australia just recently as well, racing in the Herald Sun Tour.
Yeah.
So it's really getting some of those big athletes to come out to Australia. Obviously, Bolt, I'm not sure if it's his brainchild, but he's the face of it.
Yeah.
So getting big athletes like that really puts Australian athletics on the map, because it was streamed through FlowTrack in the US.
Yeah.
And it was also streamed in the UK on BBC Sport.
Yeah. The point is that this athletics in Australia will never be the biggest sport. It's never going to rival the AFL or cricket. But we need to push it up above other sports and into people's agenda, or at least we need to ensure that people know that it's happening and it's on. It was great to see that the event was marketed as a way to see Usain Bolt live in Australia. But the people who went cheered on the Australian team, I thought, really well. There was a lot of encouragement going on. There was big cheers, big roars every time something or one of the athletes did something amazing. And it was just quite a good atmosphere there.
Yeah, the atmosphere was one of the things I thought was a big strength, especially with some of the banter between teams. Bolt saying that he's going to bring it. Riley Day last night saying that Bolt was lucky that she wasn't running in the 4x1 at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Just the atmosphere, like Jen Lacar's running back and forth across the middle of the track.
Yeah.
Flames shooting up when the 3-minute challenge was over. It was really good,
Yeah.
I thought.
I agree. The problem with athletics up until this point had been that it had become stale, because it always seemed like there'd be one or two favourites, and between either of them, they'd win the event. Like Rio last year, you had Usain Bolt do his triple. You saw Mo Farah run the 5 and 10k double. And there wasn't too much people coming from the clouds and doing well. I mean, there was definitely some of those cases, but it seemed like the favourites always won. So I think with Nitro, what was great that you never knew who was going to win, how it was going to pan out, and that was because some of the new events that they had. What did you think was a new event that they had, and were you happy with how it was? Or
I thought most of the new events were pretty good. The one that I probably had the most lackluster enthusiasm about was the 150.
Yeah.
I don't see the point of it.
Yeah.
I don't see how it is better than a 200 metre, with a 60, that is basically half the distance of the previous shortest event, which is the 100 meters. Whereas the 150 just felt like it was in a really odd space for me.
Yeah.
Because the winner was always going to be either the winner of the 100 or 200.
Yeah. Would you have rather the 100 or 200?
Yeah, I think... Well, it was good to see him try, but I think I'd have rather just stick with the 200 meter.
Yeah. I was going to say, they didn't have any events that you'd see at a normal performance meet. And I thought there's nothing wrong with potentially just having the 100 flat that everyone knows it's a favourite event for most people. Out of the Olympics and World Champs, a lot of people just watch the 100. So I was thinking you could even just keep that as a normal flat race.
Yeah.
And build all the other hybrid events around it.
And something else I was thinking about was knowing how fast you should run it. A fair few people have the basic idea of what a good time would be. So, wow, he ran the 200 meters in under 20 seconds sort of thing. Whereas when you're running a 150 in 15 seconds...
Is that a good time?
Yeah, is that a good time? Obviously, you've won the race, but it's a bit hard to get an understanding of where that stacks up against the rest of the world.
But does it really matter? Is just Nitro just about seeing who wins on the day and not about the actual results? Is it more just about who finishes where, the order, rather than the times?
Yeah, see that was the problem. That's why I've only really had a problem with the 150. Like the 60 meter, that's a pretty... They do it indoor.
Yeah, they do it indoors at the moment. Yeah.
Although for most people, the indoor is less well known than the general outdoor, because that's obviously what they do at the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics.
Yeah.
So yeah, just for me, I thought that the 150 was in a bit of a weird space.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what I really liked was the relays. Yeah, always at World Champs, Olympics, whatever, relays are some of the best races to watch, because with the chance of a missed baton change or a dropped baton, there's no certainty until the race is run and won. Such as in Meet 2, when the Aussies, all they had to do was finish and get through to win the night, missed their second change.
Yeah.
Changed outside the zone, they got disqualified, and it changed the meet on its head. We ended up being second. And so that the relays are always such an interesting event to watch with potentially chaotic scenes. And Nitro used this to their advantage. They did mixed sex and distance relays, and they did several throughout the night. The intrigue about men running against women and which order to put their runners in just makes it so interesting. You see Jack Hale come from a long way back because he's versing women. And then you saw other times men started off shooting ahead out of the pack, and it's just crazy to see the differences in speed.
Kept you guessing until they were crossing the line, that's for sure.
Yeah, you couldn't tell who was ahead. So it'll be interesting to see how the tactics unfold in regards to what's the best order, men and women. I really think that relays are a must for this format to succeed. I think especially Australians love the idea of a team sport. We love seeing dominant teams play well. So you've had like Hawthorn in the AFL, everybody likes the dominant team, but we used to have this problem with tall poppy syndrome when we don't necessarily like or rate high the performances of individuals and we pull them back. So I think that we need to make athletics more of a team sport. Yeah. And relays are one way of doing it. I mean, you've got your 24 athletes, 12 men, 12 women, so you've got that team essence. But then the actual events make them as team-oriented as possible.
Yeah, because they had, 3 relays?
Yep, they had the 4x1, the 4x4, the 2x300, the medley relay. So over the nights, they did a couple of different ones.
Talking about it being a team sport, another thing that I thought they did really well was with all those interviews, you found the personality behind the athletes.
Yes.
For most of the other... I keep going back to Commonwealth Games and the Olympics because that's when most people watch athletics.
Yeah.
There's so many events going on all the time that you'll be watching, I don't know, the rowing, then you cut to the athletics. oh, look, Sally Pearson ran such and such time. Did you think you ran well? Yeah, I thought I did. Okay, now back to the tennis or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas a night just all about athletics, interviewing after the races, and people when they ran out onto the arena at the very start of the night on the red carpet, got the crowd fired up. I really thought it was good to see the personalities behind the athletes. Yeah, which
It
is
was
something most you don't often see.
Yeah, because I think that's one to bring interest to the sport. Morgan Mitchell seems to have nearly taken on the face of Australian athletics recently with the bubbly persona, and the characters are what grows the sport. That's why Usain Bolt's almost the best athlete. He's so over the top, so fun to be around. He's so cool. He's just brought a lot of interest to the sport. So definitely personality is something.
Yeah.
What else did you think that was good about the series, or you enjoyed seeing?
I really liked how in this series, because you could only have 12 men and 12 women, there was a bit of overlap between what races or events a person would usually do and what they had to do. For example, Lapierre, because he's a long jumper, but he did the leg of the 4x1.
Yeah.
So it's really good to see how some of their skills can transfer between two different events. Like obviously,
Yep.
for long jump, you know they need to be really quick and
Yeah.
really powerful. I'm pretty sure Jack Hale, before he started concentrating on his sprinting, he was also a long jumper.
He was, yeah.
And then he hasn't gone back to long jump, but Lapierre's sort of now he does both. So.
Yeah.
Or he has done both. He obviously he's a lot better long jumper than he is sprinter. But it was really good to see him transfer his skills across to something he doesn't usually do.
Yeah, that limit on team size really promoted that to happen. You saw sprinters, 100, 200 metre sprinters step up to the 400 metres in the 4x4 relay and things like that, because you couldn't have picked 400 metre runners in your team. There was just not enough space to cover all of the events. So it's definitely interesting to see how well they'd go in an event that wasn't their preferred. The final thing that I found really good about the meet was the integration of para-athletics and para-athletes into mainstream sport. Our two Australians, Ella Pardy and Scott Reardon, did really well over the 3 nights. And as we mentioned earlier, Isis Holt, along with Seb Coe, brought the trophy in at the end, and there was an emphasis on para-athletes, which was really good to see and really good for future aspiring para-athletes.
Seeing some para-athletes on prime time alongside the
best of the best as well. And some of them performances are really quite good. I saw the 200 metre the other night, and they flew. It was a handicapped race, which always makes it interesting. You hope the handicapper gets it right due to the differences in disabilities and gradings. But it was interesting, definitely. But we've talked about the good things, but was there something that you didn't like or you thought that could be improved or made different for the coming years?
I think they just need to tighten up a bit of their refereeing.
Yeah.
Especially the two main examples are obviously Australia's disqualification at the end of the second night and Camille Buscombe not knowing that she hadn't been eliminated and she thought she was, and all that sort of mix up there.
In the elimination mile.
Yeah. So both those things happened on the second night, which weren't great for the meet. And especially seeing as there aren't that many events, and it's only over three days, that for 2 mess-ups to happen on the one night, it wasn't very good.
Yeah. They could definitely fix that up, but I don't think there'd be radical things they needed to change with that. Just a couple of minor things.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen the track events sped up and be closer together. There was still 3 or 4 minute gap. When I was at the track, I was like, are they pausing just to concentrate on a field event or something? And I didn't know, because there was no announcing. They were playing music. There were a couple of field events. I didn't know whether the TV were concentrating on a field event, or they could have easily put the commentators over. But then again, we needed television time for adverts to make money. So it's getting that balance of it keeping the spectators interested enough.
And keeping the sponsors happy as well.
Exactly. One of the things that I thought, the ticketing, I went and it was $40 for I think the cheapest ticket there. And I really thought the first year, maybe 2 years, it should just be about filling up the stadium so at least it looks good on TV.
Yeah.
Because it always, if you watch on TV, you see a stadium pack, you're like, oh, that looks good. Everyone looks like they're having fun. I want to go along. Creates interest. And then you might be able to rise price. But the first night, there was empty seats everywhere. I saw it on TV. And I was just like, they've missed the mark, I think, a little bit there.
Yeah. Especially when you compare it to something like the Big Bash, which is only about $20. And even the AFLW, the women's footy, they've had it free this year. I don't think they needed to have it free at all, considering on the first match there was a lockout.
Yeah.
It was over full. But with something like this athletics meet, where the big draw card that they were playing was Usain Bolt running.
Yeah.
If you weren't super duper interested in Usain Bolt or just seeing him for $40, I think it was a bit over the top.
Yeah, but obviously we don't know their budgets or anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Also, one other thing was that they overdid, I think, the dancing and the dancers. They had them really loud. They did a lot in between. And I just feel sometimes that it cheapens the event and is a bit of a gimmick. I just think that the focus should be on the feats of the athletes running, and that the music or the dancing should be around the athletics, and they shouldn't be side by side, because for me it turns it less into about the sport and more into it being a performance. I mean, at the end of the day, sport is entertainment, so you can see that correlation. But I think we need to ensure that the athletes were the focus of the night and not be sidetracked by too much dancing and carry on.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now you've heard our reactions to it. We'll just talk about some of the wider reactions from broadcasters and the news and the wider community. So the series was broadcast by Channel 7, mostly for Australia, but also overseas, like I said before. So it was broadcast to the US, China, India, Japan, the UK, Spain, Indonesia, New Zealand, and some countries in Africa. There was talk about some of the commentators being a bit too biased for a domestic channel, especially if it's being broadcast overseas.
Yeah. Basically, the coverage from Channel 7 was called for a domestic audience, and there were some international calls that the commentators were very biased and only cared about the Aussies. But I think that was just the nature of that they only had the one broadcaster and they had the exclusive rights and were broadcasting to Australia. So I didn't think that was too much of a issue or concern.
Although I don't think I ever saw an interview with somebody who wasn't Australian or from the Bolt All-Stars.
Yeah.
So they could do a bit better.
Yeah.
But they're still testing the waters to see how interested the domestic audience is. So they were really playing up for that, like you said.
Yeah, it was great to see that Seb Coe, the IAAF president, was there for meets 2 and 3 on the Thursday and Saturday night. Heard him on the radio on the Friday morning, and he said that he really tipped his hat to the Aussies for attempting to do something radical to shake up athletics. And he agreed that something had to be done for it to stay relevant in today's world and that something was needed. He said that he was keen to let the individual federations, country federations, create something of their own. So Athletics Australia took that on board and have set up this Nitro concept as a separate entity to Athletics Australia so that it could potentially move overseas it
could expand
overseas
to other countries as well.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the two of us thought it was a really good series. They could have done some things better, but we had really positive reactions in general.
Yeah,
and Bolt said something similar at the winner's presentation, which he would, considering he won it. He called it a brilliant series.
Definitely was.
So that's it for the show this week. We know it was a bit long, but we'll be back to our regular podcast next week.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you everyone for listening. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube and SoundCloud as The Australian Runner, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram too. See you next week.
See you then.